Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. This video is slightly related to the last one. Actually, it's probably more related to the last one than you might realize, and you'll see that some of that as we go. And some of that is the relationship that a lot of the people who use phase plant have also been really big on the whole OTT concept. Now, OTT stands for over the top, and it comes from a patch that was in Ableton's Live, but particularly now Xfer Records, as in Serum, made a little free plugin that duplicates the functionality of that, and it's become a bit of a thing. What does it do? Well, it does this. Drum loop. It overcompresses. Before we get too much into that, let's do the background. Who is it? Where's it from? Xfer Records, you'd know them for Serum, Cthulhu, and a few other bits and pieces. But oddly enough, if you go to their website to get OTT, which they are sort of number 2 famous for, it's not there. You end up having to go to Splice, where it's sort of free. And by sort of, I mean it's really not. Yes, it's correct, you're not going to actually have to shell out cash, but they are going to put their hooks into you. If you are happy with that process, brilliant. If not, well, I don't know. I gotta say, I haven't been impressed so far with what I've seen, but they seem to have a mindset and to be chasing a demographic which is very different from that which I was brought up in and trained in as a professional. Up to you which way you go on that one. You might say, well, why am I discussing Splice in here? It's because they've inserted themselves in the process and inserted themselves into my life. Splice will try to get you to commit to monthly things and this, that, and the other, and try to have you buy things via their platform. Fair enough. I'm all for capitalistic doing business. I just don't like the way they do business. Because the problem is, the moment that I had signed up for something, they start sending me things. They sent me something about Astra, and I'm thinking, okay, that might be a bit interesting. And I was almost half wondering, is Astra actually, or is Splice actually Xfer Records' new thing to deal with the current fashion and marketing? I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I don't really care who it is, because you can't buy Astra, despite them advertising it to me. The only way I can do it is to get onto their $20 a month. Not interested. Fair enough, it's a business offer. I'm not interested in that offer. But what really got my goat was that within 24 hours, I had 3, if not 4 emails from them trying to be like, why aren't you doing this? Get off my cloud, man, is all I can say about that. So, it comes from Xfer Records, who I don't have Serum, but I do have respect for them, for Steve Duda and his product. So let's have a look at his product. As I said before, this thing came out of an Ableton Live patch and a certain style that certain music mixers or composers, I'm not calling them producers because a record producer is a whole other thing. Go look up Sir George Martin or Alan Parsons if we want to play this right. And this basically duplicates almost exactly what it looked like and what it does. It's a combination of 3 or 4 different practices all at once, and as the name says, it's about extreme compression. And you probably noticed this here. From off, very, very clean loop from Reason. And it is just hammered, really hammered. Initially looking at this, it doesn't make a lot of sense as to what it is and what it's doing. So unless you know what it is and what it's doing, chances are, yeah, you can wiggle the knobs until you go, okay, I think this is what I'm looking for, but chances are you're not really going to be able to use it productively or constructively. You'll probably be using it destructively, and that's what you're looking for. And I guess a lot of the people who look into this kind of thing are sort of more destructive in the way that they approach mixing. I look to see what value can I add to this, how can I make the song shine. It's about kind of taking a baseball bat, throwing the song in the air and then whacking it and going, oh, how far can I hit it? fair enough. It's a thing. I just don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm saying that this is the excellentest way to make records. I don't think it is. So, before we go further, let's actually look at my good and bad. Okay, so what I think is good is, yeah, it definitely does what it says on the tin. It does deliver on exactly what it says it's going to do. And good on you, Steve. You've got that right. It is relatively easy, but it's also pretty darn hard in the sense that it's obscure unless you understand what it's going to do. Now, I'm going to take the time to show you what it's doing underneath the hood, actually using a completely different set of tools so that you can see. Once you understand, then you're going to find it far easier to actually use this in control. It's, well, free-ish, because the cost is you have to go to Splice, you have to give them your email address, and then you have to deal with the fact that at least within this first 24 hours, they are just spamming me. Not impressed with that. They also put you into that mindset of like, oh, you need more tools, you need more, what you're doing is not good enough. And as I keep saying, I think that is the most dishonourable way of doing business. People like it. If you want to play the game, you're welcome to it, but it is a cost involved in getting your hands on this. It's one of the few times where I'm going to say, if a friend will give it to you, download the DLL from your friend. In terms of what's bad, we've kind of covered that. The way you get it is terribly bad. What's bad is overkill. But to be fair, the name tells you it's going to be overkill. It is very easy to overdo things when using this device. Take extreme care. And bottom line is this even a good idea? From a mix engineer's perspective, the way I was trained, this is not a good plan. And we will talk about that as we go through. So let's look at it, and I am looking at it with an open mind, and I was kind of like, oh, wow, that's actually kind of cool, that's interesting what it does. It is a powerful effect. Is it a thing I'm going to take to my heart and use in my productions? Incredibly unlikely. I have used this process before without even realizing that that's what it was called, but as a style, I wouldn't do it. So we have our drum loop, which is being brutalized. We can set an overall depth of the process. I assume what I'm saying here is right. We can change the time constraints. So that's going to be something to do with attack and release, but they don't tell us what it is. That does bug me. It makes it far harder to use. I also find it rather difficult to set the correct, like, to literal times. Whether that's a display issue in Reason, I'm not sure. This you do need to be aware of. This is our current output level. I turn this device on. Look at the difference. It's adding a huge amount of level. Now, the first thing that we should be doing here is leveling that up so that we can have a fair comparison, because basic rule of thumb is if it's louder, we think it sounds better. It doesn't, but we just think it sounds better. And that causes a lot of dramas in mixing. So it's hard to even them up, but roughly that. Is it better? No. I know these are horrible settings, but they're default settings, and I actually think that it's made this drum loop less loud, less punchy. It's made it very fat, but it hasn't made it better. When we've got the extra level, we think it's made it sound better, but when we just do a straight A to B, no, it's not. And this is nothing against Steve and Xfer, because they were delivering an already existing process. It's the process that's flawed. We're then split into what appears to be high, mid, and low. I know that that's the case, but it's not very well explained. We've got level controls for each of those, meaning we can resculpt what we hear. Now that's interesting. I know that multiband compression has been all the rage amongst, well, forum dwellers, and they say it's the only way to master things. Yeah, okay, go for it, but no, it's not. There's some real problems with it, and you should be able to hear those problems here. If we can try and get these back to roughly where they were. No presets, so I can't put it back. And that's okay. The thing you should be noticing there is that the reverb has become very uneven because we're processing our treble section, our mid section, and our bottom section separately. If we were doing single band compression, just good old-fashioned straight compression, when something really loud happens, like fireworks above us, excuse me as I try and find the word, when something huge happens like fireworks above us, our whole world actually shuts down. We might even close our eyes as that happens. Loud noise, we close our eyes, we close our whole world down, meaning that all ambient sound around us moves at the same relative thing. So if the noise above us has caused us to say, let's close our world by 24 dB, we've closed our eyes, we've closed every sound around us by 24 dB. That's a hypothetical number. The problem with splitting into bands here, particularly on masters, and it's okay on instruments so long as you understand what's happening, but particularly if we do it on a master or on a bus, is that we've now changed what's happening. Because our sound above may not have a lot of top end in it because hi-hats aren't as thirsty as kick drums, then we will find that our shutdown of our world is not an even 24 dB across the board, but it might shut down 6 dB here, 12 dB here, 36 dB here, meaning that our reverb, our world, has become warped. And that you might go, but that's super Benedict, cool, banging. Okay, fair enough, you're allowed to. But the problem is that our world has become warped. So if you're then trying to say, okay, here's the sound, every time this goes into process, the world is warping. If you decide early on, I want to warp my whole world, and you just set it to a warped standard, like you take your reverb and you turn down the treble a little bit, you turn down the mid quite a lot, and the bass a huge amount, that's just called EQing, and that's fine because it's pretty set. It will move in an analog or an even format as things compress. But if every time this happens, your world does this, it's like imagine walking down the street and every time a car goes past, the world changes color. That is really disturbing. You can use it for effect, by all means. Just like if you watch Big Bang Theory, there's that little transition where it goes and then you get the feeling the world turns inside out. Very clever use of effect. But if you keep doing it to people, then you're also going to be putting a lot of people off. As somebody on the spectrum, having to listen to mixes where they've been OTT'd, multi-banded and OTT'd again, everything just sounds super creepy and I turn them off. I cannot stand listening to it. It is a problem. So just be aware, if you use this effect, that you're not creating a problem in which you drive away a lot of potential listeners. So we can readjust our bands. Okay, fair enough. And then we can control upward and downward compression. And this is where gets interesting, but where it's tricky to understand. And a lot of the effect relies on upward compression. So let's stop for the moment and have a look at how it works. Let's look at this. We will open up. It's exactly the same drum loop. And multipass. I found a use for multipass. So KHS, thank you for suggesting that I look at it, because once I was doing this, I was like, hang on, this is a great visual way of showing it. Multipass, thanks to KHS for giving me the ability to look at it. I've don't recall ever having looked at it before, but it's a cool thing if you're down with this. It's a way of splitting things into bands. And as we see with OTT, it is about splitting into bands. So what we've got is this. Let's work our way through one step at a time because we've got several things. Here is our drum loop going into a single compressor. Most of us understand that when it goes over the top, over the threshold here, it gets squished. To resolve that, we might turn the level up. That's easy. That's the normal or top-down compression. But there's another side of compression that's being used here, and that is that it's holding the level up. So when the level falls below that threshold, the vertical line here, this compressor looks to hold the level up. So you can hear that that reverb is seriously messed up because it's trying to hold it up when it wants to be gone. So you've got that juddering hysteriosis. Yeah, we could mess around with attack and release and what have you and maybe even it up a little bit, but the reality is we're warping the world. It's always going to sound horrible. So essentially what OTT is doing is, to start with, it is doing this. It's choosing a threshold point, which you can see there. It's that band in the middle. Let's pull him up to the top. Pop him over. There we go. You can still see him. That's this here. You can adjust this here. That's your threshold, which I've got here, and I've narrowed down to one band. And then everything that goes above gets pushed down. Everything that falls below gets dragged back up. And that's how you end up with that pancaked sound with no dynamics whatsoever. Yes, it makes it seem extremely loud and it makes it seem extremely long, but the lack of dynamics is extremely scary, but fascinating in its own way. That's the core of how this works. But there's then another stage. So your first stage is downwards compression. The second stage is upwards compression. So either side of that threshold is being leveled out. And then this device splits into bands. So each frequency band, I don't know where the splits are on this. It doesn't indicate it, nor does it seem to give you the option to change it, which, fair enough, for a free device, no drama. Probably on the Ableton Live preset, you probably couldn't change it either. Here I've just arbitrarily set those changes to be at, well, let's say 120 being the punch frequency for bass, and 2K. So we've now got the middle band, which is everything between 120 and 2K, being processed here. The low band, which is 120 below, is this band here, and everything above 2K is on this band here. Now you can see that they are behaving differently. There's less level now in all of them. So we've also got a very different sound to our, like if we punch this out, is there an overall bypass? No, there is not. So but if we bypass all three of these, don't really hear much in the way of reverb, but listen to that snare. It's pulled out a lot of the, and that might be great, you might be looking for that, but everything's very warped now. If we set our thresholds a bit lower, because obviously there's a little less level going to each of these things, we can use our output gains. Let's do them here on the effect so I'm staying focused. Bassy. Now that really is everything that OTT is doing. It's clever. It really is. And this device, the multipass, is quite clever too. If you want to get into band splitting, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different bands. You can have effects before your bands are split. You can have effects after your bands are split, and then pile up effects one after another. So I could say, okay, let's put a delay on the middle. But I'm not reviewing multipass. It's just seeing we've got it here, and they did ask me to say a thing or two about it. That's what it does. You should be able to work out kind of the things that you can do with it from there. But that shows us how OTT looks on the inside. Obviously completely different because it's got its own code and its own structure, but essentially this is how it works. That combination of downwards compression above the threshold and upwards compression below the threshold, and then split into 3 separate bands, which means that when the audio comes in, it's pulled apart, and each band is behaving differently. So when it's put back together, the whole world that you've put in here is now warped. Can be good or can be really, really troubling. It's not uncommon to get mixes where people have struggled with them when they've gone in and used a lot of OTT because they've filled up so much space. Like we've got this sound, upwards a little, over the top, downwards. Like we've got this sound and we push it as hard as we can, and let's say here, ooh, sounds very, because you can hear those shells ringing and it sounds wonderful and manly. At least I assume it would if I wasn't wearing these things. But we filled up all the space. There's nowhere else for the rest of a mix. We already have some serious problems putting a bass in there, especially if we're obsessed with putting a sub-bass in here. We're going to have a lot of problems because there's no space for it. We're even going to have a lot of problems with putting vocal in here because this is just expanded. Kind of like if I had an airbag that went off right now and you saw it expand and fill the whole room, and I'm like, this is a mix engineer's nightmare. So go with extreme caution. It's not to say you can't do interesting things with it. It's amusing. I think it's funny. I had a bit of a laugh playing with it. Am I likely to use it? No, not at all. But if you do, that's okay. It does do what it says it's going to do, but it's just really heavy-handed. And I know that's what the name says it is, but please watch out. It's probably worth pulling back. If we want to extend, we can still hear there's some extension in those shells. If we wanted the feeling that this was more of drums in a live room and we wanted to sort of pull up the room, then yeah, this is doing that. Is it a good plan? Would I do it this way? Again, probably not, but it is achieving a result. Hear how that darkens the high end. So we can change our spectral approach here just by saying, well, okay, I'm going to squish that high end. And then when the drums are sort of out of the way, then the hi-hat becomes very, very sort of strangely forward. It's a really interesting device, but I'm going to say, getting it is you're putting yourself in line for a whole lot of stuff I would not put anybody in line for through having to deal with Splice, who are just going to seemingly spam you. And then you've got a device that I think there are better ways of doing this. And I would have said that if somebody had asked me to review the Ableton Live process. It's just overly heavy-handed, that yes, you will get a dramatic result, but the problem is I think you'll get a dramatic result that does more damage to your mix than good. I would far rather, if you're looking for dramatic, because dramatic is dynamic. You know, here's a small one, here's a big one. If I showed you a picture of a dragon that was like 300 foot tall, and the picture was this big compared to me, how big is the dragon? Well, it's about a foot tall, isn't it? Because the dynamics say that this 300-foot tall monster is a foot tall because of context. And the more you flatten everything, the quieter they seem to be, because you can't get any of that drama or context, especially when you're flattening buses and what have you. There are other ways to do it. Using some kind of drive unit, like for me, obviously in Reason, it's going to be Scream 4. There are lots of things out there that you can use for that, or the device that I showed you, and there's a big review on from a month or so back on the ADHD leveling tool. It's got a combination of drive and a heavy tube style very mu compressor, and with careful use of that, you're going to get something, and careful use of EQ, you're going to get something that punches, snaps, and sizzles. So it's all those things that you're trying to do, but you'll have a single band and you'll have a strong sense of dynamic in it. Even though you've reduced your dynamic, you're still going to have a strong sense of dynamic, which means that the drum that wants to feel huge will feel huge, and the things that need to be small or appear small will appear small, rather than everything just being exactly the same level. Therefore, nothing is big because nothing is small. May not please a lot of people to hear it. It is an interesting device. Yeah, I can just see most people sort of fiddling randomly with things until they get there. But if you're wanting to understand it, watch again, even set up something like yourself that does the splitting. There are quite a few things that split, but multipass is a pretty cool, nicely enough laid out doohickey for doing this thing. Lay it out, get your head around it. Even if you're not going to buy multipass, you might as well trial it. And then you're far more in control of what goes on. And maybe you're going to go, hey, look, I can do other cooler, better things than just bludgeoning every single part of my mix, and then wondering why I can't actually make my mix seem to work. My song just seems buried no matter what I do with it. Fascinating tool. If you're getting great use for it, brilliant, wonderful. If you're using this a lot and then struggling to finish your mixes and going, but I can't seem to get things to, I've got no feel in my mix. It sounds awful when I put it on in the car, or when other people listen to it, they just go, ooh, creepy. I'm freaked out. I need to leave the room. It's just because, well, you've gone far too much OTT. If you've understood how the device works and you're going, gee, that's exactly what I want to do, then this video still has been of use to you, because it's helped you, hopefully, to understand a little bit more how it works and where you can go get it from. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe. If you want to ask a question, and please, kind, fair questions. No point saying I'm an idiot, because I'm not. I make a living out of this. But if you want to ask why this way, and to understand something deeper, ask down below, preferably after hitting the subscribe button. You have a great day now.